Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly broadcast of Girls and Cash, Hive Founders podcast. For those of you who do not know Hive Founders Network, we are a global network of female founders. Our projects range from project idea to Series A or B, all the way to exit. The purpose of the network is to support women entrepreneurs and to contribute to increasing the volume of investment that goes toward female-funded or co-funded enterprises everywhere in the world. This week, we are really happy to welcome Andrea Sommer. Welcome, Andrea.
Hi.
So, first of all, Andrea is one of the founders of Hive Founders Network. We'll go back to that later on the podcast for more questions on that topic. But she's also the founder of UVVALABS, a company that uses artificial intelligence to help companies, organizations, to make decisions to create more diverse and accessible workplaces. So, Andrea, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and UVVA Labs?
Sure. I'm Andrea. My background is a bit of a mix between corporate strategy in the technology space, marketing, as well as entrepreneurship. And over the last 4 years, before starting my latest business, I founded and was running Hive, which was an analytics company in the events and networking space. I'm super passionate about technology, and I'm very excited about being able to use technology as a way of equalizing things for women and for underrepresented minorities as well. And my latest project is really sort of an incarnation of that, is really the idea that we can use technology for good as a balancing factor within the industry, and as a way of creating technology that is free from bias and has the awareness to help organizations create the kind of workplace that is supportive to every person, no matter who they are, what background they have, and what they want to achieve.
That's super interesting, and I love that you talk about bias, because they can be so unconscious, and we are all subject to it.
Yeah.
How do you see it impacting negatively the performance of a company, or the way a company can operate, from the way from being biased when recruiting to being biased when making investment decisions?
Yeah, I mean, bias is really a consequence of the humans that create the technology, right? So by creating technology with awareness and with diversity principles in mind, and most importantly, by making sure that the team that creates the technology is diverse itself, so that any of the blind spots that exist in technology, are the likelihood that they're not there is present is higher. So really, that's what we as a company want to do. There are so many benefits to diversity for an organization, not just feel-good benefits, but really tangible productivity and performance benefits. Companies that have diverse workforces have happier employees, more satisfied employees, they're more productive, they have higher financial returns. There are so many benefits. And really, that's what organizations should be about. We live in a culture where organizations have a lot of power over individuals' daily lives. And it's the front line, in a sense, of where change can happen in terms of providing more accessible, inclusive, and diverse spaces. There are many, many negative things that happen when an organization is not performing in a way that is inclusive, not just in terms of how underrepresented groups feel and their willingness to stay in organizations. I mean, that alone is a super expensive issue, because attrition is so expensive. Replacing people is really time consuming and expensive. And so we really believe in fixing the leaky bucket, so to speak, and really making sure that the culture is supportive and for people of all kinds, so that whatever investments the organization make in bringing people in are not just lost by people saying, well, this is not a culture that believes in me, supports me, or wants me. I'm going to go find somewhere else to work and to spend my time in. So that's really what we're about.
I love that you talk about culture. There is this quote from the management group, Peter Drucker, that I really like. Mm-hmm. Culture is strategy for breakfast. If right. Your culture is not there, you can have the best strategy in the world, and you can have the most convincing plan. You will never start to see the beginning of the implementation of it. You're clearly very data focused, and you were talking about your background in data analytics. We have more and more data now, and we have more and more quantitative proof of the benefits of inclusion and diversity, not only gender diversity, but social, cultural, all types of diversity. How do you see companies responding to this data, which is now very clear proof that it's something that all companies should be looking at as part of their strategy, actually?
Yeah, I think data is the first step, really. The awareness is really that first step. But institutional bias, racism, sexism, all the biases are really structural problems. They exist in the way that the organization is run, in the norms that govern it. And so data is really the layer of awareness. With data, so much can be brought to the forefront, and organizations and decision makers within those organizations then can have the tools to make right choices that will help dismantle those structures that are preventing the organization from being a more inclusive space. So I think managing data is really tricky for organizations right now, because there is a huge volume of data that's being produced on a daily basis. And so technology can really help in that space. It can really help in that regard. And that's really what I believe is like the combination of really smart technology and really close partnerships with the humans that understand and can deploy that technology. That's really where the power comes. Technology can accelerate and speed up decisions. It can really clear up areas where there's murkiness in the data. But ultimately, it's about the humans making something out of those that information, out of those insights, because data without action is kind of like strategy without culture.
Absolutely, I agree with you. It's actually not having the proper organization in place, and we cannot do without it. And I also like the idea that if we build the technology the proper way, there is a way for technology to help us overcome on bias and be actually a kind of a checkpoint tool for our own bias when it comes to organizing a workplace. When it comes to UVVALABS, you very recently secured the pre-seed funding for your pilot and from the MVP. Can you tell us about it? Can you tell us where you are now? Where is UVVALABS? And maybe also for the founders who are listening to the podcast, a little bit about the funding process itself.
Yeah, sure. So we're a very young company. We only started existing as a company in April, although my co-founder and I started working on this project back in September of 2019. So we've been working on it for a few months. And she and I, we are childhood friends. So we grew up together and went to university together, and we've known each other for a very long time. And we just took very completely different paths. I went down the corporate path and she went into the academic world, but we've been friends ever since, and we've stayed in touch throughout the years, and really trying to understand each other's lives, and really always talking about the idea of working together on a project that we were both passionate about. And when I returned to the US after living abroad in the UK for 11 years, that opportunity presented itself. So we thought maybe this is the right time for us to start exploring whether this time is good for us to engage in this project. So my co-founder is an expert in bias and diversity. She's consulted for the police around their use of force. She's consulted for elections, and her whole philosophy and her whole PhD career has been about creating statistical methodologies that work in low data environments, but produce high output. And that's really what we're trying to bring to this project. In terms of the funding round, we back in February, our initial thinking was that we were going to do a proper angel investment round to try to launch this product. But what we realized, first, in terms of how the angel investments work here in the US compared to in Europe, angel investors here seem to want much more traction and organizations that are a little bit further ahead than just an idea stage. So we thought that it might make sense to have this pilot program be a part of what we had done before we could secure a more substantial round of investment. So we ran some initial research activity, and we also ran some customer discovery exercises to just give us some validation of the idea. And then we really hit the ground with trying to secure that initial round. We primarily used our network to secure those funds. And because it's a fairly small amount that we raised, it's under $100,000, we felt that through our network we would be able to find those funds, and we were. We did explore some external sources that were not sort of so familiar to us, but we encountered the same issue around their sort of relative risk profile. So that's the approach that we took, and we were so thankful that actually we were able to secure the funds before the pandemic really hit in earnest. And then a few weeks later, when we were sort of ready from a paperwork perspective, our investors were still willing to put the money in. So we were very relieved about that. And the idea with this is that we will use this as an opportunity to run our pilot program. We are about halfway through a little bit more than halfway through, 3/4 of the way through with our preparation stage for the program. And we have a few businesses that have confirmed. We need 5, and we have 4 sort of semi-confirmed. And then once we've done with that pilot, then we will have enough support to sort of prove that product market fit. That big question that investors and founders alike care about does this have product market fit? And then when we do, we will probably seek out a bigger investment round to sort of take this into the commercial stage, building the product and launching it.
Well, that's super interesting and very timely as well, because one of the things that kind of struck me, I don't know if you share that, but during the pandemic, we've seen governments and organizations putting together think tank and panels, and very naturally, as human beings, when something is scaring us, and we don't know on which ground we are going to walk, we tend to group with people who look like us, who think like us, who've been to the same schools as we did, because we feel more secure. It's safer to think alike, and there is a tendency to try to. It's very unconscious, but to kind of shy away from diversity because it's going to be too challenging, and we already feel very vulnerable and challenged in these times of crisis and complexity.
Yeah.
So my thought when looking at the composition of this panel and think tanks was that we will put people together who think too much alike, so that we won't be able to leverage on these beautiful minds in a way that will help countries and organizations to prepare for what's next. And of course, obviously, there are some countries and organizations that have put together wonderful groups and very diverse. Do you see companies integrating this dimension of crisis and uncertainty in feeling maybe more acutely the need for diverse perspectives on an issue or problem, on a way to address the challenges ahead for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think uncertainty is the perfect time to embrace diversity, because diversity is all about bringing different perspectives, histories, and And all of that brings to the organization a dynamism that really strengthens things, right? It really strengthens decisions. It's not just about making inclusive spaces that make people feel welcome and allow them to perform in the best way that they can. It's really about making sure that the organization is as competitive as possible. If you have all the same kind of person in an organization, you'll have all the same kind of thinking, and that's not going to create a good product. That's not going to create services to customers who are different. So having organizations that really embrace that difference is critical, and the pandemic is a perfect opportunity to do that. For first, organizations have the bulk of their employees, most organizations have their bulk of their employees working remotely. And remote working has a serious impact on the way that that people communicate, the way that materials are saved and created. And that has impacts for diversity as well. So now is a really good time to look at how your workforce is structured, and trying to dismantle some of the things that some of the barriers within the organization that are preventing people from having that more accessible workplace. Organizations in a crisis are faced with making decisions that they would normally not have the courage to make as quickly as they can now. So it's the perfect time to really evaluate what's working and what isn't in the business. And jettison some of these structures that are unsupportive to people and organizations, so that everyone can feel welcome, everyone can feel like their voices matter, everyone can feel like they have space within the organization to be who they are.
I can totally relate to what you are saying about the structure of an organization, and how it is the structure that helps to the workplace being conducive of inclusion and of embracing diversity. I was paying attention to a post from an American activist in the context of the protests that are going on in the US at the moment, and as well in France, in support of what's going on in the US, and also on issues that we have to address here on that topic. Yeah. And the activist was saying that she was very happy that so many multinational companies were posting messages in support of their Black communities and their Black employees and the Black communities, but that she would like the same companies to post pictures of their board of directors, of their executive committees, of their top 100 or top 200 executive employees, to show that their commitment goes above and beyond just a marketing campaign. Yeah. And I have not seen one company doing it in the wake of our message and a kind of our call to action. Yeah. And when I did a little research actually after this post about these companies and who are sitting on their board of directors, who are sitting on their executive committees, and basically she had a point. Yeah. How do you think we can push diversity at the level of the C-suite in multinational companies or in large organizations, even if they're not multinational, but in organizations in general, to make sure that this message about diversity and inclusion is really voiced out from the top?
Yeah, I think organizations need to recognize that diversity is a competitive asset, and it's the biggest competitive asset that an organization can have. Until they really understand that, until they have that as a frame of reference, then the willingness to take action isn't going to really be there. So it's really about action. Like you said, having a bunch of inspirational messages is good, but it's not going to change things. So the work that needs to go into an organization requires a huge level of self-reflection and awareness, and the willingness to take the courageous steps in changing things that maybe are comfortable for the people who are already there in order to create that space. I mean, organizations and leadership in organizations are extremely privileged. There are positions of privilege, and only in questioning privilege will we be able to bring more diverse voices into the mix. So it really is about self-reflection and the willingness to step back and give away some of that power so that other voices can be heard. Other people could be part of the story too.
Absolutely. We're about halfway through our podcast, and I would like you, Andrea, to answer a few questions. I would like to propose a little quiz.
Okay.
So you can answer as shortly or as in as much length as you want.
Okay.
It's just a way for our listeners to get to know you better as a person and as a founder, obviously. So what drives you nuts? Not only as a business founder and as an entrepreneur.
I think the main thing that drives me nuts is when people say they're going to do something and they don't follow through. Lack of follow through is my biggest pet peeve.
Okay, and I imagine that you're not talking only about inclusion and diversity policies.
No, in general, I think our word is everything. You know, if we say we're going to do something, we need to do it. And if there's a serious reason why that doesn't have done, then that's fine. But that needs to be communicated actively and proactively, in my opinion.
I love that. What is your quirk?
My biggest quirk, and the feedback that I get from pretty much everyone in my life, is that I'm constantly doing things. It's really hard for me to sit still. I have a very high need for action in my life, and I'm constantly organizing things, changing things, helping people, it's a struggle sometimes because it's really important to create space in life to reflect, and I really struggle with doing that while not doing something else. So I think organizing actually is my reflection time. I should say that. So.
I like that. That's a good one. What did you want to do when you were 6 years old, 6 or 5? But when you were a little girl, what was your dream?
I think when I was a little girl, my dream was to be a doctor. I loved the idea of helping people, but I also loved science, and I loved how the human body was like an amazing machine. I had a lot of coloring books about biology, and I have some biologists in my family who I spoke with at length, and I really, really loved science, and being a doctor seemed like the embodiment of that experience, and that changed some years later, but yeah.
Well, I love the idea that you're making organizations healthier through your through the platform. So it's actually kind of a follow through.
Indeed, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
What is your favorite cartoon or book or movie?
I have a lot of favorite types of media. I think recently one of my favorite films is the film Arrival. And I don't know if you're familiar with that film. It's a story about some aliens that come to. It's about some aliens that come to Earth to sort of teach people a lesson. The reason why I love this film is because there are two messages in it that I really love. First, the first message is that time is kind of irrelevant. Some time and memory are sort of intermixed, and they move forward and they move backward. And it's a little bit irrelevant in a sense, because you can perpetuate things through time. And the other message in this film that I really like is the idea that language shapes the way that you think. Because I grew up in a multicultural environment and speaking 3 languages, and now I lived in the UK before, and now I live in the US, and I've really experienced this idea of having the place that you live and the language that you speak really shape the way that you think, the way that you articulate yourself, and really the way that you see yourself. And I really love that message from the film. In the film it's in a very visceral way, but I think I've also experienced it in a very visceral way. So I love this idea of language shaping thought. So.
I totally agree with you. I had the opportunity to travel a lot for work, and I didn't grow up in the multicultural environment like you did, but I came to speak fluently 3 different languages plus Mandarin, and they're all very different languages, and it shapes your mind in a very, very particular way. Yeah. So I can totally relate to what you are saying, and it's actually it's part of the diversity challenge in our organizations, in our companies now, to integrate people who not only speak different languages but also have been shaped in the way they work by very different mindsets. Completely. I will have a look at it. What is your favorite quote, either by yourself or by someone else?
Um, I have a lot of, again, I have a lot of quotes that I really like. And some of them I think about at different moments in my life. There's one quote that I really like that has really resonated with me. A mentor of mine gave me this quote when I was fairly young in my career. And the quote is, "When opportunity knocks, build a door." And I really like this quote because to me, it encapsulates what luck really is. You know, it's about listening to what's going on in your world and realizing when there's an opportunity to do something. And sometimes the opportunity requires that you take a strong action to be able to capture that opportunity. Not always can you just open the door. Sometimes you have to build it. And I really like this idea that it may take work to jump in, but you always have the option.
It's a really good one. I'm gonna add it to my favorite quotes list. Who is your favorite entrepreneur? This one I'm really, really curious about because I'm always looking for role model and people that I can get inspired by.
Yeah, so one of my favorite entrepreneurs is Anita Roddick, who's the founder of The Body Shop. I just really like her philosophy about blending social good with business, and I really, really enjoy the philosophy of being able to do that. The philosophy of being able to create an organization and a business, a global organization that does things that are good for the world and good for the different participants in the organization, but also is a business that's profitable and operates like a real business. So I really like her philosophy of business.
It's a great success in every sense of the word, definitely. What is the last thing that made you laugh?
My daughter. I have a 17-month-old daughter, and she makes me laugh every day. I just find it extremely hilarious, the way that she sees the world, which with such innocence and curiosity and willingness to discover and try and fall and get up again. But yeah, she cracks me up on a daily basis.
That's a good one. And what is the last thing, and this is going to be the last question from our quiz, that got you really excited?
The last thing, okay, this is a really strange one. I think the last thing that got me really excited is making bread. I know there's so many people during the pandemic that are cooking and baking, and I've always been an avid cooker, but I've always been a little bit scared of baking because, like, cooking for me is a bit unprecise and creative, and baking is a bit more scientific. And I like to experiment in the kitchen. And so during the pandemic, I decided that I was going to try to do something new and different, and baking was that thing. And it's actually been really interesting for me as a learning tool, and also a very delicious learning tool, which is good because bread is delicious. But it's just been really fun to experiment with something new, a skill that's new. And I love the idea of making, in this time of uncertainty, making something so certain and so primeval, which is bread, is just a really reassuring and wonderful thing. So that was the last thing that I did.
That's a good one. I like that. I like indeed the idea that everybody was making bread everywhere in the world during the pandemic. And it's something that is meant to be shared. So
yeah, it really is.
The message behind it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for going through our quiz, Andrea. Sure. There is one thing that I would like to spend some time on with you. It's actually the fact that you co-founded together with Felicia Meyerowitz-Singh, the Hive Founders Network.
Yes.
What was the initial intention behind it? What was the initial purpose for you together with Felicia when you decided to create Hive Founders?
Yeah, Felicia and I used to get together and talk about our entrepreneurial challenges, and in the hopes that each other, through our different experiences, would be able to help us solve some of the problems that we were facing. And over a coffee or a glass of wine, I can't remember which, the awareness dawned on us that we were not the only female founders that were going through these issues, that were going through this space. And we recognized that there maybe was a need for bringing women together at various stages of their business journeys to support each other, really. So Hive Founders started as a group, as a WhatsApp group that we created with the people in our network who were also women founders, just to create this like support network of, can anyone recommend a lawyer? Does anyone have a good accountant? Like, I'm looking for office space in central London. Does anyone have a tip? It really started with very basic structural administrative things, and eventually evolved into more emotional support, because the entrepreneurial journey is a very emotional roller coaster, and finding support from people who are going through the same thing was really, really key. And it's eventually morphed into something more content coming, and more support and information as well. So really the impetus was for us to bring together some knowledge, that kind of like visceral knowledge that exists in all of us. And the women founders have a unique set of challenges, and we felt that tapping into organizations that existed that were more male heavy would have actually made it more difficult for us as women to be transparent with the issues that were bothering us, and also seek support that would actually be relevant. So that really was the impetus around it.
And that was actually the intention continued through when we decided to develop and extend the network and to branch out in France.
Yeah.
We said that there are many different support networks for women entrepreneurs, but and to find the one that you like, to find the one where you're comfortable in, is extremely important.
Yeah.
So we're very often, that's one thing that when it comes to networking in general, that's something where so-called women's network are very challenged for two reasons. The first one is that there are many of them right now.
Yeah.
And the second one is that very often we get the comment that, well, if we only consult among women, then we will miss out on the perspective of the male in our industries.
Sure.
I still do believe that I found resources in this network and in these platforms that are extremely useful and that totally justify the very fact to have this platform, as you are saying, that are a safe place for women to express the challenges that they are going through as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What is the advice that you would give to entrepreneurs, either creating a business, starting a business, or funding a business right now in this time where we're out of lockdown? However, we're still facing quite significant economic challenges. What is, you as a successful founder, what is the message that you would like to pass on to founders who are questioning whether or not it's the right time, whether or not it's the right context?
I mean, I think that the existence of the pandemic hasn't really changed things that much for founders, because the life of an entrepreneur is always full of uncertainty. And you have to really get comfortable with that uncertainty if you want to be in this life, if you want to be an entrepreneur, and if you want to be successful. You just have to get comfortable navigating the wave, basically. So it's just a different kind of uncertainty, different kinds of obstacles that you have to face, different kinds of conversations that you have to have. But it's no different than any other time, in my opinion, in life. To start a business. In fact, I think a pandemic is a perfect time to start a business, because if you have the guts to do it when things are this uncertain, then you can probably face the other less uncertain uncertainties. So I think my advice is just do it. Try it and find a way of failing fast so that you can answer the question for yourself. Is this have legs, or do I need to change it in a way to make it have legs? And then go forward. So just give it a try.
Well, fantastic. Go forward. I will keep that in mind. Thank you very much, Andrea. It was really a delight to have you. I was really happy to have this conversation today for Hive Founders podcast, Gals and Cash. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we will continue the conversation with all of you very, very soon. Thank you very, very much, Andrea.
Thanks for having me.